Demon Gaze 2 is the sequel to the dungeon crawling JRPG Vita exclusive of the same name. This time they've made it available on the PS4 as well. How kind of them. Now, this is one of those games that reuses assets from other games, not like a Unity Store asset flip, but by other games they've made. Operation Abyss, Operation Babel, which in themselves are remakes from what I understand. Thankfully, they've toned some of it down in this game. No longer are party members just 2D portraits of hired hands from the myriad of games that reuse them. I'm probably overstating that, but it is kind of strange. So first of all, I'd like to actually talk about changes from the original. Unlike the previous game where you could select what race a party member was and how you could choose what class they were, like Archer, Paladin, Samurai, Caster, etc. In this game, each of the party members are the demons. They are fixed in both race and class, meaning you can no longer specifically choose certain races for certain classes, which provided better stat increases, like elves would mainly gain the agility stat, so they'd make better archers. Migmies get a boost to intelligence, so they're better magic users, etc, etc. Not only this, but party members are boss fights. You have to summon them in each dungeon, sometimes a secret one to defeat them, to get them as a playable character. In the original game, demons were essentially extra summonable party members, where they would not only passively buff your team, but also be an active attacker with usable skills. Here in the sequel, they've changed it so the party members, except you as the Demon Gazer, obviously are all demons. Like I said earlier, they are all part of a fixed race and class system, fulfilling certain roles in battles, but additionally, they've made them characters that you interact with to a certain extent, and some of them have active roles in the stories, instead of mercenaries you occasionally pay. I really like this change from the previous game, as it gives personality to each member of your team, especially when you fight. They'll say something now, and also when they turn into demons, and sometimes ending a fight.
Demon crab! Look, I'm nude! Just kidding. I'm so hungry.
In addition to this, there is a mini-game where you perform maintenance on the demons. This involves you finding their weak spot and then hitting it. It's fairly hard to explain. You get a few tries to do it. Sometimes it's in obvious places. Well, for the girls, like I shit you not, their nipples and such. Once you've used your tries or think you have a good spot, you can try for real. You get one attempt. If you hit the demons and, well, hit their certain spot, they gain satisfaction by orgasmically screaming. Once the meter is full, you get a scene with the demons and you learn a bit more about them as individuals. Cygnus, for example, lacks social skills and is a bit sheltered from everyday things, so she kind of stalks you and follows you about. Draco, you find out, is ashamed to be part of your team out of killing Revolution members, so she doesn't really feel like it's her place. And Capricorn is a bit of a snob and thinks she's better than everyone else because she's from royalty. Not only this, but you gain additional stats, mainly their most beneficial ones, as well as passive buffs from them. So they can help in things like traversing dungeons, like taking less damage from traps, more gems can be set at circles and extra gold, while others are in battle buffs like bonus attack and defense are increased by a set percentage. So they're pretty good things all around. One downside to this minigame, as it were, is that it requires maintenance crystals, which are a limited resource in the game, so you cannot see all of the scenes in the game, and let's face it, you're really only going to see the ones of the characters in your party, and because it's a limited resource, you might as well save scum if you fail the minigame or don't get a good enough result. Speaking of party members, annoyingly, when you unlock a new one outside of the scripted ones, Peg, Cygnus, Centaur and Draco, they all start at level 1 when you get them, meaning you have to go back to low level areas and level them up and prevent them from being one-shot. This is why some characters in the PS4 version I've never used, because it takes so long to get them up to the same level as your current party. I suppose some of it is because making later party members have more mix and match skills or more complex ways of utilising them, like the ninja, thief, scout and priest classes. It's there to, condition you into being a bit more cautious and actually trying them out instead of just, using the same tactics you've probably been using all day. So the story, which I've been putting off, the story is pretty standard, much like whenever I have to describe any video game story, but it's split into 2 parts. The main story revolves around you and 2 sisters, Muse and the other one I've forgotten the name of, Prim, that's her name. They're leaders of a revolution and trying to overthrow a character called Sirius Magnestar, the evil leader of Asteria, because he's oppressing the people. Not only that, but throwing them into furnaces to turn them into star fuel. So he's a pretty bad man. Anyway, the 2 sisters are your childhood friends, but conveniently you suffer a bit from amnesia, so most of the backstory and their characters are explained through that. You also have characters from the first game all joining the crew, like Promuth, who's all into the occult and seemingly forgets to put on a decent amount of clothes from time to time, and Lazarum, the elf potion seller, who's now clumsier and 400 times the biomass he was in the first game. Anyway, exploring the dungeons in the game liberates the area of the city, and the percentage of it you explore, the more it's liberated, which only really serves to progress the story, really. I really can't do justice in talking about it, but you find out the sisters have magic powers. Muse can convert the demons by taking them into her room and doing something, but whenever this is done in the story, there's usually an event before you can use them, so I suspect she's either shagging them or torturing them into submission, or both. While Prim's magic is her song Starlita, which dispels Sirius Magnestar's brainwashing, but there's a catch, which I won't spoil. Once the main game is finished, which for a JRPG is actually relatively short, with only about 45 hours, but I have done this game twice, you can engage in the bonus story, which was DLC in the Japanese version of the game. This takes you back to the setting of the first game, Misrid, and you have to investigate Grimmadar Castle again with a different layout due to some magic. And you face bosses from the first game, mainly all the demons, and features the last unlockable party member, Cancer, who's actually pretty decent. If you played the game on anything lower than hot difficulty, then boy oh boy do I have some news for you. This section is fixed on hot or higher, not sure why, but while we're at it, the difficulty of this game. One of the strangest aspects of the game, while it does have easy, medium, hard and very hard changed to temperatures like lukewarm, warm, hot, burning and incinerated, what makes it strange is that even though upping the difficulty makes enemies tankier and hit like trains, increasing the difficulty also increases the XP gained, making it less grindy. I've done 2 playthroughs of this game, first on PS Vita on normal and then on the PS4 on hot. It took less time on the PS4 version because I didn't have to grind character levels so I get the best skills. So the game punishes you for playing on easy. This, however, does go out the window when you've completed the main story. The bonus story, which was DLC, like I said, in the Japanese version, only allows you to play on hot or higher, and believe me, you will get your ass kicked. So the gameplay and the mechanics. The real strength of this game is obviously the combat. Characters are arranged along the bottom of the screen in a formation you put them in. Yes, there's formations, pretty basic though. You have a front row and a back row. Characters specialise in either being a backline character with long range weapons, like my personal favourite of mine, Lepus, I can't actually pronounce the name, the Archer, and most, if not all, of the magic-based characters, which have low physical stats. Then you have the front row characters that are tankier and damage dealers. Most of these types of characters have low range weapons to attack what's in front of them. Out of all of the characters, only the Lancer class is actually considered strong enough in both positions, while all others are noted as having only one good position in your party. Enemies likewise are set into formations with rows and such. Enemies further back in the formation can't usually be hit by you unless you have appropriate weapons. The weapon system, however, lets you know the range of a weapon. Short range weapons like katanas, fists, chakarams, etc. only attack one row in front, so you can't attack if you're in the back row of your crew. Likewise, you can't attack an enemy that's in the second row. Medium range weapons can be anything really, spears, axes, bows, but they let you target an additional row, so you can attack the row behind or from the row behind. And then there's long range weapons which let you attack anyone from anywhere. This is mainly, range weapons like slings, bow and arrows, and also some axes are long range, which is quite funny. Yes, I just imagine a 30-meter axe just hitting somebody from absolutely miles away. Each character party member has a fixed set of skills to utilise in each engagement. Once you level up, the characters gain them automatically. Some of them are active skills, meaning you have to select them. Others are passives, like recovering mana while you're walking in dungeons. And then there's some combos, like Lepus's True Snipe, which makes the character focus and able to use certain skills. But in addition to that, you are able to use any basic skill that requires concentration off the bat, such as Snipe. So a passive and an active skill in one go, pretty good. While 90% of the character skills are fixed, there are 3 sets of what the game calls Liberty skills. The protagonist actually gets these as well, but they're linked to a non-existent karma system. You can either be good, neutral or evil. Depending on whichever one you pick, you get a different set of Liberty skills. Good karma is basically you get some extra healing skills, neutral is mix and match, and evil is more damage dealing. So for demons and yourself at level 0, 20 and 60, you can select an extra skill from a list of up to 3. The other skills are locked out, so pick wisely. The ones at level 0 and 20 are fairly common skills, which most of the demons will learn naturally, but with the level 60 ones are massively upgraded forms of skills, like double wild swing and dual slash being wild swing and slash 1 being used twice in one go. And there's a few new ones like Centaur's Lucky Impact, which deals, from what I've seen, absolutely astronomical damage. The skills and general gameplay, however, much like the previous game and Operation Babel and Abyss, games suffer from somewhat lack of balance. What I mean is, in each of these games, there's a skill called, well, at least in this game, it's called Devotion. It's a skill that Peg can learn naturally. But what it does, and it does the same in each game, it makes enemies target the character in that row. Basically, any time an enemy attacks, it will singly attack that character, no matter, who they target. It's pretty overpowered. But in addition to that, your character also gets a massive damage reduction of about 90. The game never tells you that, but that's basically what it does. Now you might think, just don't use that skill. Well, you basically can't, because enemies will absolutely annihilate your team. Otherwise, some of the early party members are actually kind of paper thin. Like Leo, deals out massive damage, but one hit and she's basically a goner. And also those party members have low range, so you can't put them in the back row. The game is actually balanced for you to abuse this skill, kind of like how Borderlands 2 is balanced around the B shield instead of actually nerfing or removing that item. So yeah, that is one of the critical faults of this game's system. So with that, 2 of your party members out of 5 are kind of fixed, which is kind of annoying and limiting some of your choices. The game is playable without this, I have done it, but it is so much harder. Actually, just to add to balance, and this is me time travelling because I totally forgot to add this in and forgot about the feature, dying in this game is actually one of the most awful things that can actually happen to you. I mean, statistically, 100% of people die from being killed, and in this game that is no exception. There are some revival items called Phoenix Wings or Phoenix Tails, which can revive a party member, but at 1 HP. So it's a bit of a problem, and that is a balancing factor into the game. The only other thing you can do to revive characters is have 3 of your demons up to level 60, that is Ares, Cygnus and Libra. 2 of them get revival skills which only revive up to 50% of a party member's health from, raising them from the dead. And Ares revives all party members, but at the cost of his own health, or so basically he dies. It's a self-sacrificing move. So I just thought I'd mention that. Yes, try not to die in this game because it's pretty bad. And the Phoenix Wing resource are hidden items in dungeons, and there's only a limited amount of them. So yeah, the game is pretty brutal. Lastly, with the sort of main mechanics, there is a fusion and demon gauge. Whenever you hit an enemy in battle, you fill the demon gauge on the side. Use this gauge for transforming your party members into demon forms, which they'll become stronger and get different stat buffs depending on the character. Peg will get defense, Lepus will get accuracy, Draco and Leo more attack, for example. This drains the demon gauge each turn, but can also be used for demon skills, which have to be used at the start of each turn, which can have many effects like party-wide buffs, enemy debuffs, one-off attacks. These vary depending on the party and are the skills you unlock via the maintenance system. But later on in the game you can unlock the fusion ability as well, where the Demon Gazer and a demon become one entity, and you can unleash a barrage of attacks upon the enemy. This uses up the whole gauge, as you can attack an enemy for as many times as the gauge is full. It's kind of risky to use, as the demon will be out of the fight for a few turns afterwards, so judging on when to use this and when not to use it is another level of depth the game has going for it. One of the good things about this game as well is the fairly complex item system. Looking at it, it's all kind of confusing at first, but it's actually quite simplistic. Each weapon has the damage values and number of hits. If it's one or two-handed weapon, its range indicated by S, M or L. If it's one-handed, sometimes it can be put in either hand as a support weapon or could be held with a shield, or there are items in the game which allow you to dual wield two one-handed katanas regardless of the hand. If it's got additional stats, it boosts at the bottom, or in some cases reduces, as well as effects like regaining health each turn, being able to paralyze enemies, knocking them out, which is actually quite funny. There's a joke weapon in each of these series. It's some sort of magic hammer, which has incredibly low damage. It has 6 damage but about 45 hits, and each hit has a chance to knock out an enemy. Pretty funny, but not the most effective weapon against bosses. Where were we? With the one-handed weapons, they can be held in either hand or can be held with a shield. Above these stats, it has enemy varieties in the games, all colour-coded. If it's coloured red, it's not very effective against that type or has no effect at all, mainly against undead and spirit enemies. And blue is more effective against that enemy types. This does apply to armour and shields as well. It just means that blue, obviously you gain less damage from them, and red you take massive damage from. The orb next to the weapon name is the element as well. There is an element system in this game. Red is fire, blue is water, yellow is light, etc, etc, and white and grey has no element, from what I can remember, because I'm not looking at the footage. Then on the right it has other stats it can boost, like accuracy, evasion chance, magic, defense, and cut, whatever that is. The game never actually tells you what that is, and it's pretty hard to figure out by the gameplay. Not that many of the weapons increase whatever this stat does, it's mainly for armour, but I have seen weapons have 1 stat on that, but I don't know what it does. Pressing triangle over a piece of equipment will swap to a brief description of the weapon, and then triangle again will show you who can equip it, which is pretty neat, as there are a lot of characters, but some of the weapons you can judge if the character can use it by just, basic logic. A magic user isn't going to use a two-handed axe, for example. Well, there are some situations where a heavy character like Draco can actually use a bow, so that's kind of funny. Not only can everyone make use of the basic weapons and armour system, but there is also underwear, which is extra armour, hats, which are much the same, and amulets. But each character can also equip up to 5 artifacts. Artifacts are unique items which carry in-game skills, which add to the depth of the game, and can allow any character to use any skill. So for example, you could have a power type character use a heal spell, for example. Also, there are a few unique artifacts like God's Hand, which allows a party member to equip a two-handed weapon in each hand. Combine this with Draco, who has a skill which boosts two-handed weapons, and you're looking at some insane damage. I suppose I should actually talk about the inn as well, which is where you stay. It's the main setting for the game. Much like the first game, you live here, and so do your party members. It's where the story progresses. But there's also some interesting stuff. In the basement, there's Promoth's Sex Dungeon, where you can revive yourself for a fee. Kind of strange. Also change the difficulty. But there's also the Ether Mill, which you can change weapons into ether and upgrade them using said ether. You also have to come back here to change the difficulty and talk to her if you collect hidden skulls in each dungeon, which will remark about how nice they are before doing something with them, sexual in nature probably. Then there's also the weapon seller, Castle, from the first game. Much like Promoth, he'll want something for you to collect, but it's mushrooms this time, and there's like 4 in each dungeon, all of the same colour, and he wants them to use them as narcotics, presumably. Anyway, you can sell your excess gear here, which there'll be a lot because of the limited backpack space, which fills pretty quickly if you love collecting. But he'll also sell weapons which are only really good for the start of the game, but he never really upgrades what he sells that much, which I assume is to prevent players from becoming too powerful with no effort. You can also play the lottery to win better gems, which is a good way of spending money. as it becomes somewhat pointless if all the weapons and items you can buy are inferior to your current gear. Also at the inn you have the ability to give party members their own rooms, which means you can give them furniture which can drastically increase their stats. So there's even more gear for you to collect for each character. So dungeons, as you can probably see, it's first person when you explore the dungeons. Encounters are random or sometimes indicated by the floating monster tokens or skulls. Some of them are mini bosses or it's a story related boss fight. Progressing through each dungeon requires you to capture the summon circles, which require gems. Gems are linked to the equipment types in the games, like panties, swords, bows, etc, etc. Each circle requires you at least use one of these gems. But the more you place, which is usually up to 3, but can be increased with character skills, enemies are stronger, but in exchange, better loot will appear. The loot you get is obviously the same as the gems you place. While you do only get the same ratio of gears to gems you place, you can get more with +1 and +2 gems, especially useful if you're trying to get artifacts, as those gems are in limited quantities. Once you've cleared a majority of the main game, you unlock the ability to place demons in your party at special summoning circles. Obviously, you lose them in the next fight, but the gear you gain is something else with massive stat buffs. You can sometimes gain unique items which otherwise there are only one of, indicated by the colour orange. In each dungeon there are a few puzzles or some gimmick. For example, in this one you have to find the undead king's wives, who'll give a description of what they all look like, and you have to talk to them based on his vague description. This one, for example, has a red bottom, which is obviously a baboon. I was going to do a joke about it being somebody that loves it in the ass, but fuck it. If you select the wrong ones, however, there'll be a moderately tough boss fight for you, while others have obstacles like water currents to impede you, and others have traps en masse, and I don't mean the people kind. One feature of the game is actually kicking walls to discover hidden doors and items to progress. I think you know what this means, as some areas have traps in the walls that damage you a decent amount, so you can't do what you like, while others are floor traps that drop you down a level, setting you back a fair bit, or they damage you much like the walls. So what I don't like and what to watch out for, because there's so much information in this game and so many different party combinations and how you play the game does throw too much information at you, so coming back to the game from not playing for a while is actually a little confusing and probably make most people want to retry. All this footage was actually captured about 2 years ago and it's just been sitting on my hard drive, so yes, 80 gigs worth of footage which I'm now going to have to sift through. Yes, I found it very hard to I booted up the game and I was kind of struggling to sort of get back into playing it with all my little tactics and stuff. There's actually a few glitches in this game because it's pretty much a series no one has ever heard of or really had too much money spent on it. Well, one would assume anyway. There are a few glitches in both versions of the game. In the Vita version, trying to collect one of the items in the castle dungeon crashes the game. It's not that much of an important item, so it's fine. While in the PS4 version, you have to quit the game in order to reload a save if you have the free DLC installed. And also in both versions of the game, the thief party member, Pavo, when transformed into a demon form, actually plays the incorrect voice lines. It actually plays Centaurs.
This is the beautiful end of a fool.
Here I come! Yeah! Ha! Yeah! Yeah! Yeah!
Which sounds super strange. Well, I at least hope the voice actor got paid for it anyway. The only reason I know is because the death cry is actually different for both characters, but all the other lines are exactly the same, which is so strange. One of the other things I don't actually like is not the music in itself. The music in this game absolutely slaps, don't get me wrong. It's got this sort of jazz undertone with, you know, orchestral vocals and violins and all this and that. It'll be playing throughout this video, but one thing I don't like is when you get to a demon boss fight, the music is absolutely phenomenal. However, when you demonize or turn your demons into the actual demon forms, it plays the song Demon Eyes, and that literally overrides any music in the game. So if you like that song, which is a pretty good song, it does get incredibly repetitive. So any of the sort of tone and pacing the music can set for certain areas of the game or certain combat in the game is actually overwritten by, you know, the poor execution of having the Demon Eyes song play when you transform your demons. So yeah, that's one of the things I don't actually like. While I do love this game, it is fairly low budget. I mean, nothing really moves, so it's more like a visual novel in some aspects, and I'll admit, it's not the most interesting game to watch gameplay of. I simply cannot do justice talking about all the mechanics of the game and in battle. You know, there's some features that enemies can do, like kidnap your characters, disrupt party formations, which you can counter because every character can have two sets of weapons, meaning if your frontline demons get sent to the back, you can swap a weapon set and you're able to use ranged weapons. The game certainly has its charms, and there's something, you know, satisfying about building a team of warriors and collecting loot. I cannot begin to tell you the obsession I had with trying to collect all the artifacts to make my demon waifus as strong as possible, just to do it all over again. You know, the story is fairly decent, but I didn't talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. But I would certainly recommend the game, especially if it's on sale. Certainly if you have a PS Vita, make some use of that thing, as it's like the perfect game for it, but it's just as good on PS4.
Hey, bro, did you just grab my boob?
That's why I need you to die super fast, okay? Thanks!